0. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. The Committee on Oversight of Homeland will now come to order. Actually, Information Committee hearing. I want to thank all of our guests for being here today. This is a very most important issue, which is the triangle and economic growth in the triangle areas in Central America. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the subcommittee in recess at any time. I want to thank again everybody for being here today. What is this committee hearing about? We're essentially responding to irregular migration at the U.S. southern border. This is one of the big issues that we've been focused on in DHS. And as you know, Department of Homeland Security is a key player in the national security. And we are looking beyond our borders to help our southern neighbors stabilize their local economies. Over the last year, this subcommittee has had a number of opportunities to dive deeply into the complex issues that result in migration north from this region of Central America. We've heard from a variety of government and non-government experts who are working hard to understand and combat the root causes of migration. And of course, this is no easy task. The Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador are facing enormous economic pressures, as well as some political challenges, as well as social challenges. This subcommittee has held hearings to examine how COVID-19, the pandemic, and climate change have also impacted these countries already battered by other challenges. We've also explored how weak governing systems have all too frequently allowed corrupt actors to divert aid money intended to help support development to other areas. We've also looked at how transnational criminal organizations exploit vulnerable communities, especially those who seek a better life in the U.S. One message, though, has come out loud and clear. We cannot expect migrants to stop making the dangerous journey to the U.S. until they have hope and opportunity for a better life at home. Building this hope will take time and a lot of energy and collaboration from the private and public sectors, not only domestically, that is in the Triangle, but in the U.S. as well. And although DHS and the U.S. government have committed significant resources towards helping the Northern Triangle governments increase their security and improve custom enforcements, there's only so much the U.S. government can do to help create jobs and support local economic development. We've learned also that simply sending aid money to these governments will not create meaningful and sustainable change that is required in Central America to create good paying jobs. This is an area that is best suited for the private sector. And essentially creating a partnership with the private sector, we can come up with new opportunities for the region to begin to stabilize this area. Recognizing this fact, Vice President Harris called upon companies to support efforts to increase economic development and investment in the Northern Triangle. With the launch of the call to action last May, the Vice President secured commitments from several major companies and organizations who collectively pledged to invest about $1.2 billion in the region. These investments will be made in a number of areas, including development of sustainable agricultural practices, bringing internet access to millions of homes, and banking services to individuals across the region. However, just as critical will be a number of new employment opportunities that these investments must bring forth, therefore reducing poverty and giving people the hope that they need for upward mobility and sustainability in their local regions. Increasing access to long-term employment will remove one of the most common causes of migration to the United States. Today, I'm pleased to welcome 3 companies who answered the Vice President's call to action. And I look forward to hearing directly from these private sector partners about their plans and how these investments will create much needed change in the Northern Triangle. I'm also looking forward to hearing about any challenges that you may face and how the U.S. government can be an effective partner with you to move forward. As General Patton used to say, lead, follow, or get out of the way. We want to play partners with you. We want to make sure we increase your probability of success in Central America. Creating a long and lasting change will be difficult, but we are lucky to have partners such as all of you to help lend a little hope and opportunity that will make America a good partner to our neighbors south of the border. With that, I thank you again for joining us today. And what I'd like to do as chair is recognize a ranking member, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Peter Mayer, for an opening statement. Welcome, Mr. Mayer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses who are participating and who have joined us here today. I think there is, a lot of partisan rancor around the border, and we come around from different perspectives there. But when it comes to, how we can counter those irregular migration patterns, I think we speak largely with one voice on wanting to make sure that, especially in the Northern Triangle and in Central America, we're doing everything that we can to promote stability, to promote some degree of economic sustainability, so that we can make sure that we are strengthened by our neighbors, and we are countering some of the corruption, some of the transnational criminal organizations, and some of the other challenges that we have seen in those areas. So I'm very excited that we're able to speak here today, and excited to be able to address, this excellent group. I mean, we have a number of folks here, and we're looking excited to hearing from those stakeholders on the variety of migrant push factors. And the private sector is obviously leading the way in many areas with this call to action. When Vice President Harris put out this call to action for the business and social enterprises, it was aiming to provide for a more stable economic environment for development in the region to stem the migration problems. And I certainly agree that a more economically and politically stable environment will curb migration, and commend the private sector entities here who have pledged to assist this effort, as well as those who've been working in the Northern Triangle for years prior to this formalized announcement. While important, private sector investment only yields results in the long term. There are immediate steps that this administration can take to stop the ongoing crisis, including addressing the significant pull factors for illegal immigration, as well as the gaping security vulnerabilities along the southern border. Since President Biden entered office a little over a year ago, more than 2 million migrants have been encountered at the southwest border, which is more people than those residing in all but the four most populous cities in the United States. On day one, this administration halted the construction of the border wall, implemented catch and release policies allowing migrants to flow into American communities in the midst of this pandemic, pulled back on fully utilizing Title 42 public health authorities, undermined the Remain in Mexico policy, hamstrung our border and immigration agents, and facilitated the travel of illegal immigrants across the United States, even following arrest warrants to serve as valid forms of identification. And in December 2021, a record-breaking 178,000 migrant encounters occurred along the southwest border. We had a resolution inquiry released earlier this week following our concerns around how the Biden administration has handled the border crisis, because I certainly feel that the American people deserve complete transparency into the decisions made, which have encouraged illegal border crossings, aided criminal activity, and increased the flow of dangerous drugs like fentanyl into the United States. So despite my frustrations with the administration's handling of the border crisis, I'm sincerely interested in hearing from our witnesses here today, learning about the plans for investment in the Northern Triangle, both what has already occurred and what is coming down the pike, and what their most significant concerns and challenges are regarding the success of these plans. We've certainly seen initiatives tried in the past, and we want to make sure that we learn from those mistakes and not repeat them. I once again emphasize these outcomes will not materialize for many years. So while we're focusing on those longer term targets, we cannot be distracted from the more pressing challenges we're seeing today, because responsible governance requires us to take a comprehensive approach. We can and should invest in long-term regional solutions, but we must also act now to solve the crisis at our border. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and I look forward to speaking with our experts assembled here today.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Members are reminded that the committee will operate according to the guidelines laid out by the chairman and ranking member in their February 3rd colloquy regarding remote procedures. And without objection, members not on the subcommittee will be permitted to sit and ask questions of the witnesses. And now I welcome our panel of witnesses. First, we have Mr. Anderson, Andy Warlick. Mr. Anderson is chairman and CEO of Parkdale Mills, a textile manufacturer that generates $2 billion in sales a year, has 5,000 employees, and plants located in the U.S. as well as internationally. His company leads the world in spun yarn with automation, sustainable practices, and new technology. Our second witness is Mr. Dan Christensen. He is Senior Director of Affairs at PepsiCo. Before his role leading to PepsiCo's policy engagement, he served as Deputy Chief of Staff of Policy for the U.S. Department of Agriculture from 2011 to 2016. And before that, Mr. Christensen served several years as Senior Professional Staff Member on the U.S. Senate Agricultural Committee. Our third witness is Ms. Maria Nelly Rivas. Ms. Rivas serves as the Vice President of Government Relations for the Latin America at Cargill and is a member of Cargill's Central American Business Leadership. She has extensive leadership experience in business, international development, and government. She's previously served as the Latin America Regional Coordinator at the UN World Tourism Organization and is Assistant Resident Representative at the UN Development Program in Managua. And our final witness will be Mr. Daniel Rundle. Mr. Rund serves as Senior Vice President and William Schreier Chair in the Global Analysis at the Center of Strategic International Studies. His work centers around U.S. leadership, building a more democratic and prosperous world. Before joining CSIS, Mr. Rund held leadership roles at the U.S. Agency for International Development and the World Bank Group. And without objections, the witnesses' full statements will be inserted into the record. And now I ask each witness to summarize his or her statement in 5 minutes, beginning with Mr. Warlick. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Correa and Ranking Member Meyer. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on a subject that is so important to the U.S. textile industry, our workers, and our Western Hemisphere trading partners. My name is Andy Warlick, and I am Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Parkdale. We're headquartered in Gastonia, North Carolina. We're one of the world's leading manufacturers of spun yarns and cotton consumer products. We operate 34 operations in the U.S., Latin America, and Europe. And 24 of those locations are in 8 different states here in the United States. Textile and apparel production is one of the most consequential employers both in the United States and the Northern Triangle. The U.S. industry success is tied to the success of Central America and our Western Hemisphere partners. It supports $12.5 billion in two-way trade with the CAFTA-DR region and supports more than 1 million textile and apparel workers. Over 79% of what we make at Parkdale and Yarn is exported and sent to the Northern Triangle countries. It's further processed into fabrics and finished apparel and sent back to the United States market duty-free under the rules of origin. Those exports also use U.S. cotton that is farmed in 18 different states. Supply chains from China have broken down because of a combination of factors during COVID. Freight issues, forced labor concerns in Xinjiang, labor shortages, rising economic tensions between the U.S. and China have led many brands and retailers to recalibrate their sourcing methodologies in order to mitigate risk. This today is a historic opportunity to both onshore and nearshore this critical production chain, and our company and our industry stand ready to help. If we seize this opportunity together, we will harness significant further economic development in the United States and in the region, and we can achieve economic opportunity for all of the workers. When our industry invests, it creates high-wage paying jobs in the U.S. and the CAFTA region. It also creates more stability. We create supply chains that are quicker, more reliable, and transparent, and they're free of forced labor like the abhorrent practices that we've seen documented in Xinjiang. There's also a supply chain in which a container coming from Central America versus China cuts greenhouse gas emissions by 70 to 80%. We need to build on this momentum going forward. That's why Parkdale is investing $150 million to build a new yarn spinning facility in Honduras and support and expand our operations in Hillsville, Virginia. I was pleased to announce our new investment with Vice President Harris at a White House roundtable in December. We are deeply committed to the region and this investment because of the yarn forward rule of origin. We know of hundreds of millions of dollars of textile and apparel investment that will be made in the U.S. and Central America region this year as a result of two things: sourcing shifts and the yarn forward rule of origin that drives and supports these investments. I believe we could double exports out of the region. And this is not just the art of the possible, it's achievable if we do it together. Right now, the region only represents 7% of what is shipped into the United States. The other 93% mainly comes from China and Asia. If we doubled it to just 14%, it would create 2.2 million jobs and $6 billion in new investment. And that's according to an independent study that was conducted by Werner International. This would not only help mitigate environmental concerns linked to high levels of greenhouse gas emissions in the Asian supply chain, but it would also address the forced labor crisis in Xinjiang and help blunt China's global dominance in these industries. As outlined in my written submission, China's predatory trade behavior has a far-reaching adverse impact across the U.S. textile industry and Central America region. We need Congress to continue to be aggressive on Chinese predatory trade practices that are undermining investment in our industry and also in the region. I would urge Congress to oppose any proposals that weaken U.S. CAFTA-DR rules of origin or concepts around adding more of these so-called flexibilities to the agreement. All of these are red herrings that would undermine critical investment, not just in the U.S., but mainly in the region, and give backdoor access to China and other countries that are not party to the agreement while chilling local investment. And as the CAFTA-DR Textile and Apparel Industry Association wrote to Congress, it will exacerbate the immigration crisis and dismantle current and future investments. We need Congress's continued support to stand with the U.S. textile manufacturing workers and those in the region, which has built a strong co-production platform. Now is the time to unlock more investments and further bolster this critical co-production chain. We know of, as a part of this recalibration of the supply chain, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment are going to be announced very soon. We believe a comprehensive manufacturing plan for the U.S., Northern Triangle, and entire hemisphere is ripe. We need targeted high-impact investments and competitive loans to upgrade infrastructure to help reshore and nearshore critical production chains. We need low-interest loans or loan guarantees for expansion in our sector. Several other key recommendations are outlined in my written testimony, including better coordination among federal lending agencies, incentives for greenhouse gas emission reductions in the supply chain, investment-based tax incentives, and bolstering trade enforcement tools to counter predatory trade practices, and also closing the de minimis loophole that allows shipments from China to come into the U.S. duty-free and keeping China's 301 penalty tariffs in place on finished textiles and apparel products. We can't act in a vacuum. Our supply chains are interconnected with the region, and future job and economic growth depends on a strategic plan. The region is responding to the new market opportunities. It's seen significant growth over the last year, and the U.S. textile industry is recovering from the pandemic. Production is coming back strong, and the trajectory is even stronger. Parkdale and our entire industry is excited about the abundant opportunities available. Our investments will create a ripple effect that unlocks the door to future investments. Hundreds of millions of dollars in investments are coming into the region this year, on top of billions in existing investments that are there. The tide is starting to turn, and we can seize on this moment together and bring manufacturing back to the Western Hemisphere from China and other Asian countries. I'd like to invite members of the committee to come down and tour Parkdale's state-of-the-art facilities and see firsthand how your policies and onshoring and nearshoring efforts contribute not only to our growth, but to the health and expansion of the entire U.S. textile industry. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I would be happy at some point to entertain any questions, but thank you for allowing me the opportunity.
Mr. Wallach, thank you very much for your testimony, and we're going to take you up on your invitation to visit your operation in Central America.
We'd be honored.
Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Christensen to summarize his statement in 5 minutes. Sir, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, and thank you to you and to the ranking member and to the members of the subcommittee for inviting PepsiCo to testify before you today. My name is not Paulie Uribe, as the written testimony would suggest. I'm Dan Christensen, Senior Director of Government Affairs, based here in Washington, D.C., and filling in for Paula this afternoon. Fortunately, she had a family emergency to attend to in Colombia and could not be here today. So she sends her regrets, and we really appreciate the committee's understanding. So it's an honor to speak before this subcommittee about PepsiCo's commitment to both the U.S. and Latin America. But before I give you the highlights of our investment in the Northern Triangle, let me share some background on PepsiCo. We're the largest food and beverage company in the United States and have a presence in over 200 countries with a portfolio of brands that people know and love around the world. A testament to this loyalty is the fact that over 95% of U.S. households have at least one of our products in their kitchen. Together with our franchise bottlers, we employ and support the jobs of nearly 120,000 Americans across the country. That number increases to nearly 500,000 when you consider PepsiCo's broader impact. So in total, our operations contribute approximately $37.9 billion to the nation's GDP. At the heart of the success of our business strategy is PepsiCo Positive, our corporate sustainability mission, which will serve as an end-to-end transformation of our business, from how we source our ingredients and make our products, to how we engage people to make better choices for themselves and the planet. Turning to our efforts in Latin America, PepsiCo has been in the Latin American and Caribbean region for over 100 years. PepsiCo Latin America includes all of our foods and beverages businesses in that region, comprising 34 emerging and developing markets. Altogether, our Latin America business generated $7.6 billion in net revenue last year. We have deep roots in the region with approximately 138 manufacturing facilities, as well as a large distribution network, including more than 24,000 routes that together generate more than 77,000 direct jobs and even more indirect jobs. In the Northern Triangle, we invested more than $70 million in Guatemala during 2019 and 2020. This investment included the development of a new LEED certified mixing center in Villanueva, just outside of Guatemala City. Additionally, as we announced in December, we expect to invest at least $190 million in the region in the next 3 years. This will be a regional hub for us, built around a strong network of manufacturing plants, distribution centers, and sales routes. These regional investments are aligned with our global Pep Positive agenda, which will include spreading regenerative farming practices across 7 million acres globally by 2030, becoming net water positive by 2030, and achieving net zero emissions by 2040. Also central to our PEP Positive agenda is our commitment to providing meaningful jobs and career growth. These investments will drive and sustain jobs that enable people in the region to build successful lives in their own communities. In the Northern Triangle, we support over 4,000 families directly and several thousand of families indirectly. These numbers will only grow as our presence continues to expand. We expect to increase direct employment by 3% annually over the next 3 years. Additionally, our bottler CBC supports over 3,000 direct jobs and over 11,000 indirect jobs just in Guatemala. In this region, our wages are 15% above the average salaries. The turnover rate is only 7% in Guatemala, and women make up 75% of managerial positions and more than 25% of our overall workforce. As part of our PEP Positive framework, our Guatemala business, alongside our Global Foundation, will train farmers in the region around the efficient use of water and fertilizers. We are also working to improve gender equality in the region. For example, women represent 30% of our regional executive committee for Central America, which is significantly higher than the median. This agenda extends to our partnership with organizations like CARE International to reduce childhood malnourishment in the region. Our initiative with CARE works in parallel to a capacity building program to improve nutrition and hygiene at the community level that has benefited over 2,000 children in 2021 alone. In closing, I thank you again for the chance to speak to you today and would like to take the opportunity to invite the chairman, the ranking member, and all the honorable members of this subcommittee to come see our operation in Guatemala or any other country in the Latin American region. It would be an honor to host you. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions that I can.
And Mr. Christensen, we will also take you up on your offer to visit your operations.
Excellent.
100 years in Central America. That's impressive. Thank you for your testimony, and now recognize Ms. Rivas to summarize her statement in 5 minutes. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman Correa and Ranking Member Mayer, members of the subcommittee, for inviting Cargill to testify today. As a Central American, I am proud to share the story of our work in the region and to discuss the $160 million in new investments we announced in December. Cargill is a Minnesota-based food and agriculture company, but we have deep roots in Central America and have been active in the communities for 52 years. We are committed to the long-term success of the region. We at Cargill believe that agriculture can be part of the solution to many of the challenges we face today, including food insecurity and the lack of economic opportunity. We believe this to be especially true in Central America and the Northern Triangle. Our 10,000 employees in Central America, 1/3 of whom are in the Northern Triangle, work with farmers and customers every day to feed and nourish people and animals. Nearly half of our both our business and philanthropic investments, we strive to improve farmer livelihoods and nourish those in the region. It's part of who we are, and it's how we do business. We produce and deliver chicken and other protein in local households. We also produce and deliver animal nutrition products that help livestock farmers care for their animals. Our distribution network touches thousands of small neighborhood shops, farm stores, schools, and other places get food and feed. I would like to share one example of the work we do with partners like USAID, CARE, the World Food Program, and others to improve food security, nutrition, and farmer livelihoods. Melissa is a wife and mother of 3 in San Marcos, Honduras. When her husband lost his job because of the pandemic, Cargill and CARE helped Melissa start a business out of her house selling roasted chicken. Now that business has grown. She takes orders to its cell phone to bring food into her community, and she's the main source of income for her family. She's also helping put her oldest daughter through school. I have seen many women like Melissa grow their business and become leaders in their towns. In supporting them, we support families, we support schools, and we support entire communities. These farmers and small businesses carry the greatest potential to improve economic and food security. As I mentioned before, we at Cargill believe that agriculture can be part of the solution. We have seen the positive impact when partners across the private sector, civil society, and governments work together. By working across borders, sectors and industries can achieve more. We welcome the administration efforts to bring us together and do just this in the Northern Triangle. It makes strategic sense to our business and supports our customers and communities. In December, as part of our long-term strategy, we announced our plans to invest an additional $150 million over the next 5 years to expand our operations in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. We expect this investment to create more than 400 direct new jobs, as well as additional jobs across the larger value chain. We are also committing an additional $10 million over the next 3 years, doubling our historic contributions to fund programs that support farmers, entrepreneurs, and local communities. Together, these investments will help farmers and small businesses grow and diversify their income, strengthen school feeding programs, and generate more trade within Central America and the Caribbean. While we as companies can and must do our part, we are also encouraged to see the administration and this committee recognize that there is a role for governments to play. To truly remove barriers to job creation, governments in the region, supported by the US and the private sector, need to take actions that will benefit workers and employers. In closing, Chairman Correa and Ranking Member Meyer, we believe agriculture can be part of the solution to creating greater economic opportunity in the Northern Triangle. Cargill is committed. We stand ready to share more than 50 years of local insight to unlock growth and potential in the region. Thank you to the subcommittee for your attention to this effort. We welcome the opportunity to host you in the region, and I look forward to your questions and exchange this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rivas, for your testimony. And now I'd like to recognize our last witness, Mr. Rundy, to summarize his statements in 5 minutes. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Correa, Ranking Member Meyer. It's a distinct pleasure to testify before both of you and in front of this very distinguished subcommittee. Thank you for asking me to do this. The best social program is a decent job. Most people do not want to leave where they grew up. The U.S. government should take advantage of the potential for nearshoring in Central America. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided an opportunity for the reorienting and nearshoring of U.S. international commerce. A different future is possible for Central America. For example, policies pursued in El Salvador in the late 1990s and early 2000s serve as an effective example. The Salvadoran government's National Reconstruction Plan of 1992 to 1997 culminated in El Salvador achieving investment-grade bond status in 1998. By the early 2000s, El Salvador outperformed Chile, Argentina, South Korea, and Germany in the Index of Economic Freedom, which measures 10 indicators including rule of law, government spending, and market openness. As a result, migration from El Salvador to the United States was lower, and the economy was strong and growing. Job creation drove growth, decreased emigration, and poverty fell from 40% of the population in 1996 to 20% in 2000. There are many positive lessons from this previous era in El Salvador. Studies have shown that when countries reach the threshold of $8,000 GDP per capita, that migration largely halts. Mexico surpassed this level of $8,000 of GDP per capita in 2005, which correlates with the beginning of major decreases in Mexican-U.S. migration. In 2020, Guatemala reported a GDP per capita of around $4,600, while El Salvador recorded a GDP per capita of $3,800 and Honduras $2,400. The goal is to get these three countries to $8,000 per capita as quickly as possible. I'm a big proponent of foreign assistance. The reality is that all the foreign assistance, all spigots from all over the world, as a percentage of GDP to these Central American countries is very small, reaching at most maybe 3% of the GDP. Foreign aid can help, but it needs to be focused and it needs to work in partnership with others, especially the private sector. The Biden administration taken a good step by convening the Partnership for Central America. PCA convenes a cadre of America's finest companies, including some that have been testifying here today, and it's an excellent start. PCA is also in the process of inviting key local companies to join the partnership, and this is very important. Engaging the U.S. private sector is a critical initial step, but this must be done in conjunction with engagement of the local private sector in Central America. One of the fastest potential tracks to achieve these aims would be to engage local companies in U.S. multinational company supply chains. Without painting too broad a brush, I would argue that most who follow Central America closely in Washington have expressed a negative bias towards the local private sector in Central America due to fears of corrupt actors. I think we need to collectively rethink this bias. In this context, I want to raise a new organization, HUGE, HUGE, which stands for Honduras, United States, Guatemala, and El Salvador. HUGE convenes many leading local private sector companies and a growing number of very fine multinational companies. The association promotes strategic investments in the Northern Triangle, taking advantage of competitive advantages in these countries. Over the next 5 years, HUGE aims to facilitate $10 billion or more in investments among Honduras, the United States, Guatemala, and El Salvador. So what can the United States do? So first, we got to answer the mail on COVID-19. The great ideas at this hearing will be academic unless we address the challenges brought on by COVID-19. The U.S. and our partners need to do more to solve Central America's COVID-19 problem. Second, let's help close the digital divide accelerated by COVID-19 in Central America. We ought to be using our foreign assistance and other instruments to close this digital divide that's been uncovered, exacerbated, or accelerated by COVID-19 in Central America. Either we're going to do it or the Chinese Communist Party and Huawei is going to do it. It's as simple as that. Third, let's be frank. Let's get right with Guatemala. Of the three countries, probably Guatemala is the most reliable ally. If we want any progress, we need a better diplomatic relationship with Guatemala. So a simple thing to do would be to get right with the Giammattei administration. I'm happy to talk about this. Fourth, it's time to revisit and revise CAFTA-DR. It's been more than 15 years since CAFTA-DR entered into force. The region looks very different today. We've had USMCA. We ought to be looking at things like intellectual property and digital economy provisions for CAFTA-DR, and we ought to update CAFTA-DR to the USMCA standards as part of a nearshoring strategy. Fifth, let's partner with Mexico and repurpose the North American Development Bank to help Central America. This is a very actionable thing for Congress to do. Mexico wants to do it. We ought to allow the NAD Bank to operate on the southern Mexico's border with Guatemala and in the Northern Triangle. This is something Congress could easily do. Sixth, the U.S. should support a capital increase for the Inter-American Development Bank under the right conditions. The IDB's annual meetings coming up next month, the U.S. could announce they're supporting a capital increase that has a large private sector component to it. It could be part of a larger positive hemispheric agenda that could be announced in June that when the Biden administration hosts its Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles. Seventh, and I'll stop here, the U.S. should allocate foreign aid to support economic growth, good governance, and use foreign aid to lubricate shifts in global supply chains towards Central America. The U.S. correctly is going to be investing billions of dollars over the next several years in the region. USAID should spend monies and provide expertise to support pro-growth economic policy reforms. It should also spend monies on improving governance and security. And then the U.S. should use foreign aid to lubricate global supply chains towards Central America. The fancy terms are things called trade capacity building or trade facilitation. There's no magic bullet nor an out-of-the-box solution to the problems of Central America. The problems are solvable, but they require sustained attention from the United States. And I congratulate you, Congressman, for hosting a series of hearings on an ongoing basis on this. Thank you for doing that. It's important. Political will in these countries, and ultimately strong and inclusive economic growth to go with strengthened governance. Economic growth is possible in Central America's poorest countries, but we cannot manage or solve the challenges of Central America without the private sector, and especially the local private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I thank all the witnesses for your testimony. I'll remind the subcommittee that each one of us will have 5 minutes to question the panel, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. First of all, Mr. Rundy, I kind of totally agree with you with your thoughts. And I also agree with our ranking member, Mr. Mayor, when he talks about the challenges that we have. Bigger picture, though, I look at the U.S., we are always managing by crisis. In my years of Congress, you're always running from one issue to the other, always putting out fires. We have essentially ignored Central America, Latin America for 50 years. We only look when there's a little bit of smoke, and then by then there's a big fire and things get out of control. We're going to continue in this country, I presume, to operate crisis management. So what we need to do is try to figure out how to continue to focus right now in Central America. We talk about widespread violence, fragile democratic institutions, poverty, inequality, big issues that are going to take a long time to fix. Yet, what I want to do today is start by asking all of you, what can we do as a government, as a legislative body, to make sure that you're successful? In my opinion, this 1.2 billion that's been committed to be invested in Central America will make a splash, and the results are spectacular. So what do? Do we get out of the way? Do we help you? What are the things that we can do to make sure that you're successful right now? And I'll start out with Mr. Warlake from Parkdale.
Well, I think thank you very much, but I think there are several things. One of the things that this opportunity that we have right now to reshore, as we talk about some of the issues with the supply chains breaking down, this is one of the greatest opportunities to industrialize the region. And I would ask that we do everything we can to protect that, make this region first among any equal, give this region the trade preferences, and help keep it from, predatory practices that have damaged a lot of manufacturing in the Western Hemisphere.
Let me interrupt you, Mr. Warlake. As you know, we were looking at some legislation dealing with rules of origin, products, and CAFTA, and your industry had some concerns. My issue is I want you to make products that Americans want to buy. We need to have some of those synthetic materials, either American made or Central American. How fast can we get you up and running so that we can continue to near shore? Get this stuff from the Americas.
Well, these investments are coming in now, and those synthetic products are already made here. In fact, we own we just bought a synthetic manufacturing plant that's brand new right there in San Pedro Sula, Honduras. So that investment's going into the region. There's more investment going into El Salvador right now for that polyester that you're talking about. The problem you have if you open up the agreement, then what it does is it allows people to dump product in from China and other places.
Warlake,
undermine.
I don't want to open up the agreement. What I want to do is help you get up and running as quickly as possible. What can I do as a government to help you get there?
Well, I think right now the region's grown. I mean, if you look at the capacities this year, we're up in some cases 53% in some of these countries. So adding capacity is what we're all trying to do right now, because we recognize that there will be people that want to near shore. So we have to build this production. But that goes back to talking about financing, talking about the different, working together with the different agencies to be able to help look at these projects, and some infrastructure. Daniel talked a little bit about, but there needs to be some coordination in the region on infrastructure. There needs to be coordination between the countries in that region, whether it's on their borders and paperwork going back and forth on products going from one country to the next, coming to the United States. That needs to be streamlined. So things like that the U.S. can lead in would be very, very helpful.
Are there infrastructure issues? Are the ports sufficient for you? Railroad lines, are those issues or not for you?
Those are issues. The ports are very, very small. The rail is non-existent. And then there's always a challenge on energy, the energy grid there. But we are investing privately in some of these things, and the private sector is investing in some of these things, particularly with energy. So yes, there are infrastructure issues.
Thank you. I'm running out of time, so I'll conclude there and recognize a ranking member for his line of questions. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses here today for sharing your remarks earlier. We certainly have a very comprehensive list of expertise in the region, heavily weighted towards the private sector, which I think we agree is where a lot of those economic opportunities can be born, but also appreciate Mr. Rundy's experience at CSIS and experience in policy focusing on U.S. economic and diplomatic engagement. And on that note, Mr. Rundy, you're currently involved with Vice President Harris's call to action, the initiative we're speaking of earlier, but in that advisory capacity. Could you please speak a little bit more about your role and what that initiative truly involves?
Well, I think it's a great start. I think that Vice President Harris convening some of America's leading companies has been a really good start. I was asked recently, about a month ago, to join. I have a background working at USAID. I worked in investment banking and commercial banking, and I've had a lot of experience around private enterprise and also the role of government and the private sector working together. So I've just recently signed on as an advisor to them. So I haven't had a chance to do much in terms of on a day-to-day basis, but I agreed to do it because I really respect the team that they've pulled together. I respect what the vice president's trying to do, and I have great respect for all the companies that have been convened. I know there are a number of things that they're looking at in terms of, there are a couple things that they're in. One is that PCA is in the process of finalizing a rule of law pledge so that we don't just have more business, but we have better business. But also I know that PCA is fleshing out a large-scale concept on farmer insurance for the 2 million small farms across all 3 countries. And then finally, I just want to flag something else. There's an important role for companies through large-scale civic service programs, which could inspire tens of thousands of young people across the population. So the Howard G. Buffett Foundation and Glasswing International launched something called Central AmeriCorps initiative to harness the power of young people in the region to increase rootedness and work to improve their home communities. So these are things associated with PCA. So I'm quite optimistic about it. And I thought it was a very important, I think it's gotten a lot of attention to the region. I think to a little bit to Congressman Correa's standpoint that we have an ADD relationship with the region. I think we need to bring in various stakeholders. We need to bring in the American private sector. Having someone of the prominence of Vice President Harris putting a spotlight on American business and beginning to bring in local businesses is very important. I actually frankly think this series of 4 hearings that Chair Correa has convened along with you, Congressman Meyer, I want to just congratulate you and thank you for doing this. We don't spend enough time, or we have sporadic kind of one-off things. It's clear that you all are taking a very thoughtful and serious approach to this. So I just want to applaud your service on this and just say thank you for continuing doing a sustained attention on this. So we need sustained attention. PCA is part of that. But ultimately, the problems of the Northern Triangle of these 3 countries is going to require sustained attention over multiple administrations. We need to make a 10 or 15-year commitment to the region. The problem is we have kind of 10-week or 15-week. So I just think these sorts of this sort of effort that the Congress is doing by convening this series of hearings is very, very important. The efforts that Vice President Harris is doing is important, as well as other initiatives such as HUGE.
No, thank you, Dan. And I think that Chairman and I, agree strongly on just the challenges of that attention span component, but also, making sure that we are thinking longer term down the road. We have problems today, but we can also be working to mitigate the problems down the line. And I guess one of the things that comes up and becomes a challenge in mediating between those two are political changes and leadership changes within the region and within the Northern Triangle. And on that question, are you at all concerned with the recent change in power in Honduras and how that may impact the call to action's goal, addressing some of those root challenges?
Yeah, thank you for that. So first, let me just reiterate that our best partner in the region is Guatemala. I thought it was I'm going to put it this way. I thought it was a missed opportunity that we did not invite the Guatemalans to the summit, the democracy summit. We invited India and we invited Pakistan. Pakistan took a flyer and said no, and India came. So there's lots of countries in the world we got issues with that were invited to the Summit of the Democracy. So I'm sure someone can explain to me why Guatemala wasn't invited, but I thought that was a blooper. So I think we got to get right with Guatemala. In terms of Honduras, I thought it was quite significant that Vice President Harris led the delegation for the swearing in of Xiomara Castro. So I think there's sort of two directions that Honduras could go. It could go in the direction of a responsible social democracy, progressive social democracy, and that would be my hope, at least under her, administration, or it could go in some worse direction. So I understand why the Biden-Harris administration is investing so much effort in Honduras, and we're going to have to work with Xiomara Castro for the next 4 years. I was really pleased to see that the U.S. Senate, I don't know if they have confirmed yet. We have an ambassador who had a hearing, I think, last week to represent Honduras. I think it's the first time we've had a sitting ambassador to Honduras. So one thing we could do is confirm a qualified person like this very qualified senior foreign service officer that we're going to be sending to Honduras. So I think engagement in Honduras is good. I think we need to be cautious, trust but verify. But I think we've extended our, I think we do have to engage with the Honduran government. I think our best partner is Guatemala. We should, trust but verify with Honduras.
Thank you, Dan. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. And now I'd like to recognize Ms. Titus for 5 minutes of questions. Welcome, Congressmember Titus.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing. I serve on the subcommittee of Foreign Affairs for the Asia and the South Pacific, and we had some conversation there about expanding the Development Finance Corporation so that you could take in some of those island countries. I wonder if the countries that we're talking about in the Northern Triangle already qualify for that assistance, and even if they do, are there ways that we might change or expand or encourage more participation by that group to help finance some of these investments that we need in this area? Anybody?
I'm happy to take this, Chair Correa, but I want to see if the other witnesses want to comment on this first before I do.
Anybody want to stab at it, or Mr. Rundy? Go for it.
Hi. Hello.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
because I think that, your question, and thank you, Congresswoman, for that question, is relevant to one of the key challenges that have been mentioned here, and is the need for infrastructure. The question was asked, and it's one of the three main challenges we have identified for growth in the region and for actually realizing these investments and to be able to invest more. So energy, ports, roads, and resources that can be directed to that. But not only that, but those resources should also be along working on digitalization, bringing transparency into the systems, and making sure that those investments that organizations at the Development Finance Corporation and others can make in the region also work to improve trade within Central America. I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well. Thank you.
Well, that reminds me of another point. If we, as the chairman said, we've ignored this area for so long, and when we step back, it creates a power vacuum and China moves in. We see China's Belt and Road has expanded much beyond their neighborhood. They're building like the port in Lima. So I'm sure maybe y'all see some investment of China in this infrastructure if we're not there to help with things like this finance corporation. Anybody?
Congresswoman, amen. Thank you so much for flagging this. Absolutely. If we leave a void, China's going to fill that vacuum, whether it's digital infrastructure, whether it's hard infrastructure, whether it's vaccines, whether it's values. They have the ability now, they have enough mass and enough ability to fill in ways 20 years ago they couldn't. So you're seeing this in Central America. You're seeing this. El Salvador used to recognize Taiwan. They flipped to the mainland. The Chinese are using vaccine diplomacy and saying, so there's half the level of vaccination that Guatemala has. is half of what El Salvador has because China's given El Salvador their crappy vaccines. So they have sort of 60% más o menos levels of vaccination, or maybe a little bit higher, and Guatemala is less because for a whole bunch of complicated reasons, they got to go to the back of the line to get the top shelf stuff from us. And there's a lot of asks on the top shelf stuff. It's a longer conversation, but the point is that, and so they've had China and El Salvador doing large scale vaccine campaigns on the El Salvador Guatemala border. And so the Guatemala press says, well, if we would only, it's like, you know, in the Bible with that, the devil tempting Christ. It's like, if you would only recognize the mainland, you could get all this crappy vaccines. And so we need to respond across a series of vacuums. And one of them absolutely is digital. Another one is hard infrastructure. You're seeing this in ports and energy. I agree with Mr. Warlick's comment about having a regional approach to energy and infrastructure. The DFC is an important instrument. It's not enough, but it's an important instrument. There are a number of, there's lots of monies for green projects, but less for sort of other kinds of activities. And so I think one of the things we need to think about is making sure we have enough technical assistance for the Development Finance Corporation. That's in essence sort of like expertise to kind of make projects what they call bankable, or to kind of fix projects up to make them more attractive, or, to make them, attractive to the private sector. So sometimes it's about technical assistance, and sometimes it's about making sure that we have people that can kind of generate deals. We need to enable an alternative to China. We don't have to meet China dollar for dollar. We're not going to meet China for dollar through the DFC. The DFC is an important instrument. It needs to work with things like AID. We could put the Inter-American Development Bank on steroids. We could put the North American Development Bank and repurpose it to focus on those three countries, as well as the U.S.-Mexican border, the southern Mexican border. We could also be using instruments like the U.S. Exim Bank, U.S. TDA, and also the MCC, the Millennium Challenge Corporation. We have a new, very fine leader of the Millennium Challenge Corporation confirmed by the Senate. We ought to maybe perhaps take another look at Honduras or Guatemala for Millennium Challenge Corporation investments. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Titus. And now, I'll recognize Ms. Harshberger for 5 minutes of questions. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, witnesses, for being here. Mr. Warlick, Parkdale employs 455 full-time employees at your Mountain City facility, which is in my district. And I want you to know I visited that facility, and it was top-notch. I learned so much about what you do, and those workers are dedicated, and it's a wonderful facility. Just letting you know that. It's a wonderful place. And, I learned a lot reading your testimony, sir, that your company is the largest domestic consumer of U.S. cotton, of U.S. grown cotton per year, which is amazing, 755 million pounds. And I've also learned that you have become one of the federal government's largest domestic suppliers of PPE products in the country. And that is great, because we need allied countries, or like the triangle countries, instead of depending on China for PPE. I've been in the pharmacy world for 35 years, and we saw nothing greater than what we needed to survive during the pandemic. Our medications, our PPE products come from an adversarial nation. And so it's wonderful that you're stepping up to do that, sir. And also, in your testimony, you talked about the newly announced investment in Honduras, and it won't only create new jobs in that country, but will also help support Parkdale's manufacturing jobs here in the U.S. And in your testimony, you said the success of Parkdale's operations in the U.S. is entirely dependent upon the success of our supply chains domestically and throughout the region, which I totally agree with. And if you would explain in a little more detail how your U.S. facilities and workers, including my district, benefit from a strong co-production chain between U.S. and Central America, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate those kind words. We are so excited to be in Tennessee. That's a wonderful place to operate, and a wonderful group of people that we have there. And I was delighted that you got to go through that operation. The co-production chain that we have is critical, because 78 to 79% of what we make is exported to that region to support customers there that are knitting fabrics or weaving fabrics and having them cut and sewn, and they come back to the United States. So this co-production chain is very, very important for the U.S. textile industry because most of the textile industry, 70 to 80%, is exported there. The rest would probably be going into the NAFTA region. But it is critical, and that's what enables us to buy that much U.S. cotton and convert it here, and then ship those yarn cones on containers to Central America. We also have factories in Central America that help subsidize that capacity as well, and the new plant will do just that. We will be upgrading some of our operations in the United States, putting in, some more robots, some more robotic factories, and we'll also be investing in Central America to be nearby, to be able to be a quicker response, have warehousing facilities there to support our domestic locations.
Well, I've said this all along. If we can't produce it here in our country, we need to go to allied countries, and especially those who need help, in order to be more self-sufficient in everything, not just what you do, but in everything. And so I love touring that facility. And when I saw the automation and some of the robotics that you had and how they spin that, to me, it was simply, it was art, basically, when you look at that. And they gave me some products to bring home just to see what they did. And it's a wonderful facility. And I would tell any of my colleagues to go tour one of your facilities. And I would love to go on a Codell over there to see how these things work.
We would love to have you. And one of the most impressive things I've heard from you and the chairman is the fact that there is a recognition that maybe we've underinvested in this area because it's in our backyard. These are our neighbors, and let's think about it. These are Americans. These are Americans, North America, Central America. These are Americans here, and I'm glad to hear that we should be viewing this area as first among any equal as far as development and building up. But so thank you for your interest.
Well, no worries. I'll see you shortly again, I'm sure. And with that, I yield back, sir.
Ms. Harshberger, great questions. And I just want to say we are planning to put together a Codell whose dates keep shifting on us. But we do want to go in and ask the questions of these wonderful people and tour. I think Mr. Warwick is absolutely correct. These are Americans, and if you think of the remittances, all the folks from that area that live in the U.S. that send money back on a periodic basis, that's a great revenue stream for those countries. A lot of folks live, like I say, with 1 foot in the U.S. and 1 foot in Central America, so we do have to focus on these issues. But, like I mentioned earlier, just trying to get beyond management by crisis. So if I can, that's our first round of questions. Are you all folks okay if we go for a second round of questions? Mr. Ranking Member, are you okay with that? Our witnesses? So if I can, then let me ask all of you. Pepsi, you've got 100 years of history. Cargill, you've got, I think you said 50 years of history. All of you there have knowledge about how things are working, where the rubber meets the road. Do you feel like we as a government reach out and hear your opinions when we're making policy in Central America? Mr. Christensen.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, thank you for the question, Mr. Correa. And I would say, in general, and I'll lead into this by trying to answer your last question too. And I think in general, we're a Fortune 50 company, right? And so when we look to invest and build, I mean, we look to do that within the resources of our own company. I would say in the region, what we hear from the business on the ground is that, yes, there are challenges. I mean, we're still committed to continue expanding all the commitments that we made. We plan to honor. But, security issues and I think the lack of legal certainty, those, I think just as a practical matter, those increase the cost of doing business, right? And those can represent a barrier to further investment. And I think, again, over the last 3 years, what we hear from our business there is that they've noticed a significant increase in activities that, can be a deterrent. And so I'd say we have, taken the steps of engaging with, extensively with the local Northern Triangle governments. And, fundamentally what we need there is
Let me
make sure.
interrupt you. Let me interrupt
Yeah.
you. You said you have issues, the security issue, the violence issue. That's a tough one. I'll put that one aside for a moment, but let's focus on maybe one that we can help with, which is the certainty of investment in the area, the rule of law and predictability, so to speak, when it comes to your investments and figuring out the business climate that you'll be operating in and under. Can we as a government reach out and help you clear that road, not to impose on anybody's sovereignty, but to say, these are American investors under possibly a rule of treaty, a something? Can we come up with an understanding, government to government, that this is the way we will respect your investment by your country's entities in our area? Is that something we can do? Can we do something?
Right, and something that we hear from our business there is certainly, in the region, having, the U.S. government echoing our voice with the regional governments, and we'd love to work with you on what form that takes. That could certainly be helpful. So yes, Mr. Cray, we'd love to work with you on that.
And again, Mr. Christensen, and I'll tell all of you that, 2 years ago when I went to Central America, I committed to be going back in 6 months, and it's been 2 years. And all of us know that in the middle of that, we got COVID, we have all kinds of crises. But I do hope we focus in and make a long-term commitment. It's not about Central America. It's about the United States and making sure we have stable economies south of us. Any other, some of the witnesses, can you care to comment on that? Is there anything the government can do to help you in terms of stability, predictability of your investments in Central America?
Chairman Correa, you call out issues that are key for certainty, predictability, and I think that technical assistance was mentioned before that could be transferred to governments. I think policy, in terms of policy, we work with local chambers to bring the messages to the local governments, but we also link to the U.S. chamber to bring those messages to the U.S. as well. So I think the partnership itself, and one of the reasons, and I think Mr. Rondi mentioned this as to why he's being part of this, is because we see this potential to bring together the U.S. government, our concerns, the issues we have identified, and work with the local governments. We have, as it was mentioned by my colleague from Pepsi, we work with the local governments, we bring our expertise, we bring our concerns, we bring examples, but actually supporting them with experiences and with the assistance and the investment. But as I mentioned before, investment in infrastructure, but also investment in digital tools and investment in just bringing more transparency to the system. And it could be as simple as defining what is the key process for a value chain. How do you make that digital? How do you create a system, and how do we all, businesses and the different institutions, have access to that and try it out and put it to work? And we have some pilots, but I think the partnership is also about scaling these pilots that have shown so good results in the region.
Thank you, Mr. Warwick or Mr.
Yeah, Mr.
Rocky?
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. What I would say is we appreciate, our industry appreciates the efforts by the administration and also USTR in giving us certainty on the rules of origin, because it just unlocked $900 million worth of investments there. They're going to be critical for the reindustrialization of the area. So thank you very much for that.
Okay. Mr. Rundy? Okay. I think my 5 minutes are up. Anybody else up for 5 minutes of questions? Going once? Going twice? And I'd like to thank our witnesses today for your testimony. and members for your questions and the witnesses for answering. Ms. Titus, did you have some questions?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just say, as we continue to look at development in this area, we should keep in mind the Vice President's call for including women in the development and employment opportunities. And we see little microeconomies sometimes. It's usually in the area of handicrafts where women get together and do weaving or whatever, and you see them in imported shops here. But I think they're broader opportunities. And we know women are agents of change, whether we're talking about fighting corruption in government or making investments at the local level or with campesinos who have no land of their own. So let's always remember to focus on them going forward too. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing.
Thank you very much. I just want to warn the witnesses, I'll probably be calling on you to talk a little bit more as we prepare our trip to Central America. And Mr. Warwick, again, thank you very much for your policy recommendations and thoughts, because as you know, those are some of the issues that we were looking at just recently and we'll continue to look at.
Thanks.
I want to, again, thank all of you. Before adjourning, I ask for unanimous consent to submit a statement letter to the record from Microsoft on their investments in response to the call to action effort. And without objection, so admitted. Members of the committee will have additional, if they have additional questions, we ask that you respond, submit them to our witnesses, and the witnesses to please respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. The chair reminds members that the committee record will remain open for 10 days. And without objection, this committee stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.